Welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. These are the weeks that were, are, and shall be. I have been on vacation for more than 2 weeks, hence I was a little less responsive in the comments, but I had made some videos to share with you all while I was away. Hopefully you enjoyed some of those. I did find this vacation to be very energizing. The main purpose of it really was to see some very dear old friends over in Sweden. But while we were there, I also did go to Norway a little bit, and to Denmark a little bit, and to Iceland. So it was just fantastic to see some old friends and to make some new ones. A big shout out to Sam in Iceland, who really made that trip so fantastic. Had a great time. I love Iceland, but a big part of that was the friendship that I found there. And also, it was awesome to meet Mick Scarfield, who is a legend in many a comment section here on BookTube over in his home turf, well, close to it anyway. But yeah, it was fantastic. I had a great time meeting some wonderful people, getting reinvigorated. Didn't do much reading, but I did a little bit, which I will be sharing with you in a moment. But on the channel, I've since the last episode of the weeks that were, which was about a month ago. Here's what I've been up to. So I had a video that I put out, sort of this thing that most booktubers do, or a lot of them anyway, where it's sort of a mid-year check-in. Some people do tags, some people have other formats that they follow. I simply like to talk about the books that I've enjoyed the most so far up to this point. So I did share my thoughts on those reads thus far, and some of them are likely probably to make my favorite books of 2024 at the end of the year. I also had a couple episodes of Dear Dr. Fantasy. One of them was with my good friend Brian over at BellTube. I think that Brian is the perfect example of the kind of community building and positivity that you can find here in our corner of BookTube. Just a wonderful human being, a great person to know, a good friend, someone with depth and kindness. And I just had a great time talking to him. I think he's someone that I could easily see myself being friends with for the rest of my life. So it was really great to sit down with him. And also, I had another episode of DDF with Bridger from the Library Ladder. And wow, another great person to talk with, someone with a lot of depth, a lot of knowledge, someone that I admire a lot because of the thoughtfulness that he puts into his videos and how he approaches the fantasy genre. He's very well read. And he makes some fantastic videos. If you haven't seen, I'm sure most of you have, examples of his deep dives, and he's particularly interested in some of the older gems of the genre. So if you want to learn more about the deeper history of fantasy and some of the authors who are foundational to the genre, then I recommend Bridger's channel, The Library Ladder. So great time with Brian from BellTube and Bridger from The Library Ladder. I also did a collaboration with Liam from Liam's Lyceum, and we talked about medieval tales for fantasy fans. We just threw out a bunch of stories from medieval times that we feel people who love fantasy would enjoy. And these are also foundational, by the way. Many fantasy writer gets a lot of inspiration from these much older stories. So they're good ones to know if you're a fantasy fan and also just a fan of literature. So, and Liam is also someone with a lot of knowledge, a lot of depth, a great contributor to our community, and I hope more people will go and check out his content. And I had a discussion on the Dresden Files, focusing mostly on Book 7, Deadbeat. This discussion included Josh from Red Fury Books and also Ben from Books with Genghis Khan. And we had a great time. I really enjoyed chatting with those two, and I had a blast reading Deadbeat. It is my favorite Dresden Files book thus far. I'm told the series gets even better, but Deadbeat was great. I felt like Butcher's formula worked perfectly in this book, and there were a lot of laughs. There were a lot of just perfect moments, iconic moments, and people who have read Deadbeat, I'm not giving anything away, but people who have read Deadbeat probably know exactly one of those moments. And I just can't say what it is because it would spoil it, but it gave me I loved it. So I had a good time. And I feel like this is a series that I still haven't quite caught the Dresden Files fever yet, but I can feel it coming on maybe. So we'll see. I mean, I trust the fans who've been right about pretty much everything in that series so far. But yeah, that was a great discussion, and I look forward to continuing in the Dresden Files. And I had a fantastic time talking with Joanna about the White Luck Warrior. This is the fifth book in the second Apocalypse, but it is the second book in the second series in the second Apocalypse series by R. Scott Bakker. And yes, the second series being the Aspect Emperor series. So yes, did that make sense? I hope so. But anyway, it was a great book, and I've been enjoying Baker's writing even more in Aspect Emperor than I did in the first trilogy, which is the first part of the second Apocalypse series, also known as the Prince of Nothing. So yeah, Bakker is an immensely talented writer. I have not complained, but I have remarked upon the bleakness of his world. Every time I read one of his books, it's pretty depressing. But he is one of those writers that I have so much respect for because he poses the tough questions. He explores the humanity, warts and all, and he really holds up a mirror to us in a way that I find to be challenging, but also just honest, and I think a really important thing to do. I just enjoy his brilliance as well. His prose is magnificent. So as much as I do find his stories tough, it is something that I actually appreciate about his writing. And the guy's a genius, no doubt about it. And there's just some bizarre, crazy stuff. So if you're somebody who likes the grimmer stuff within the genre, and you don't mind some tough traumatic stuff as well, or if you can deal with that, then I do highly recommend that series. And yeah, just having a really deep, wonderful time, and it's great to be able to talk with Joanna about the series as well. So we'll be continuing with that, of course. And I'm actually pretty eager to get to the next book in the series. There are two more that I need to read to finish everything that Bakker has done thus far, at least. And I had a discussion with Alan from the Library of Alexandria about why we love One Piece, and I had just a blast. I always have a fun talking with Alan, even when we don't agree about everything, but he is my friend, and I love hearing what he has to say. And I had a great time talking with him about One Piece. He is somebody who's actually, he has deep knowledge of One Piece. He's primarily an anime watcher, but he is very devoted to this series, and of course he's going to say how he feels about whatever, and sometimes he steps on a few toes while doing that. But that is something also I appreciate about Alan. So it was a really cool discussion. You can feel the love for One Piece throughout, and yeah, and some great insights as well, because underneath that sense of humor and that curmudgeonly demeanor, Alan has a lot of pretty cool, deep thoughts. He would deny that probably, but he does, trust me. And what else have I been up to? Oh, by the way, also, I'm going to have more of these Why We Love One Piece discussions, if that's something you enjoyed. There's more coming. I have one scheduled with Murphy, and I'm really excited to talk to her because she is the person who finally gave me that push that put me over the edge, that started me on manga. And of course, if you know anything about Murphy Napier, you know that she is a devoted One Piece fan. So I'm looking forward to talking with her about One Piece as well. And I'll have more of these in the future, but we're just getting started with these. And I will be continuing, of course, with my read of the manga One Piece. It is time to get back into that as well. So yeah, I'll be picking up Thriller Bark very soon. I'll be talking about what I'm reading in a bit. And what else? Well, let's see. I also made a video about the live action series on One Piece, the adaptation, which I actually enjoyed more than I thought I would. I actually thought I would probably not like it, and I ended up liking it considerably. I do not consider it to be the equal of the manga, but that doesn't mean it's bad. And I actually thought that they did, for the most part, capture the spirit of the manga, which is what is most important to me. I'm not looking for a one-for-one adaptation. I understand when something gets adapted, especially from book to screen, there are going to be some things lost. There are going to be some changes, and I am totally cool with that. But I thought that overall the actors did a brilliant job. There were some changes that made sense to me. I could see what they were trying to do, and those changes, in my mind at least, were consistent with the spirit of the manga and the themes that the manga is constantly exploring. And a lot of the commenters let me know that, in fact, Oda, the creator of the manga, was very much involved in the live action. They consulted him, and he gave his blessing to it, which makes total sense to me. I feel his stamp there in some important ways. So I did enjoy that. I've even got a little emotional at times, which it's a good sign. Again, it's not the manga, but it's a great introduction to One Piece, especially for the many people out there who are not familiar with manga. And that's a good thing. That's more exposure for the series. So yeah, I had a lot of positive things to say about it for the most part. And I have also been putting out some videos. I'm very excited about. I have been putting out videos about the Broken Binding Special Edition of The Way of Edan. The Broken Binding is producing special editions of the Edan trilogy. I could not be more excited to be working with the Broken Binding. They are just amazing. Their special editions are, to me, the best out there. Not only because of the quality, but because of the affordability. It's really amazing that they're able to put out such wonderful editions at the price that they do. And they are doing some great things over there. In fact, just recently, they announced that they're going to be actually a publisher as well. They're going to start their own press, which is very exciting news. So I congratulate the Broken Binding on that. I'm thrilled to be working with them. And I revealed the first two full color illustrations. They're going to be a full spread, so 2 whole pages in the book. Color, just for me anyway, gorgeous illustrations done by Renee Agner, who's doing 4 of these. And actually, I'll be soon revealing the 3rd of these 4 full, beautiful color illustrations that are going into this special edition. There will also, by the way, be 4 black and white illustrations in there, and a new cover and a color map as well, being done by Jack Shepard, who did the original map for me and the cover design. And some more stuff, some more goodies that I'm just so excited about this special edition. And I will continue to reveal the art as it becomes available. But yeah, I'm just so happy about this. I mean, this is just a dream come true, really, for me to have this going on. I want to mention that it is going to be out most likely in, I think probably the way the pacing of the art now, there was talk of maybe late August, but I think September is probably more likely, but we shall see. I might be surprised. I don't know the date yet, but I will be screaming about it as we approach it. And also the audiobook for The Way of Dan that Alan from the Library of Alexandria is working on, and that is going to be, I don't know which is going to be, it's going to be interesting to see which is ready first, the audiobook or the special edition. But both around the same time, I expect. Late August, early September, somewhere in that range. So yeah, exciting things happening in the Edan world, in Jormungand. Something I wanted to mention, I just noticed that I have passed 500 videos for the channel, and that's a milestone. I mean, that's pretty amazing to me that I have put out 500 videos here on the Best of Fantasy. So yeah, I mean, it's a milestone, something to give myself a little pat on the back, and yeah, it's just a privilege to be here, and that anyone at all would watch any of those videos amazes me on some level. But obviously, I'm delighted to be here and to be part of this community and to be in dialogue with so many fans, people who are passionate like I am about storytelling and about fantasy. So yeah, it's great to be here, and I thank you all for watching the videos. Elsewhere on YouTube, I have been in some really wonderful discussions, one with Christian from Christian's Hobby Blog on epic fantasy, which I very much feel personally is not dying. It may be in a bit of a down cycle at the moment. It may not be something that traditional publishing is pushing very much, but I think it's still alive. There are many awesome epic fantasies that I probably will never get to all of the ones I want to read. That's how many are out there. But also there are people working to put out new stories that are epic fantasy, including myself. I didn't get the memo. Apparently, that epic fantasy is dying. So I'm writing it. I'm writing epic fantasy in the hope that there are still people out there who want to read it, and apparently there are. So yeah, I do believe that as long as there are people who want to read it, it's not dying. But had a great time talking with Christian about epic fantasy, what it is, what constitutes epic fantasy, and so much more. I also was in a discussion of the Dark Tower series. This was hosted by John Douglas, and had a great time talking with him and Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative, and Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, and John from Talking Story. We had a great time. Just a really, I mean, that's a series that it is one of the weirdest and most compelling reads I can think of. One of the series that I'm so happy that I read, and that is a result of being here on this platform. I don't know if I would have picked up anything by Stephen King if it weren't for people like Mike telling me I should read it. And I'm really glad I did, because I thoroughly enjoyed that series. Mind-blowing in the best way. So many weird, crazy things happen, and I love the blending of genres, the strangeness of it all, and finding out that Stephen King is a great storyteller as well. I mean, the Dark Tower series has some fantastic moments, tear-inducing moments, highly emotional stuff. King is very good at getting you attached to his characters and is fearless about portraying what happens to them. So yeah, very compelling stuff. And I was also in a kind of a debate, if you will, a head-on-head collision between two titans of the genre. This was something organized by Aaron over at Bibliophile, and it included John from Talking Story and Brian from BellTube, and it was essentially a sort of the blade itself versus a Game of Thrones, and there were various criteria that Aaron had come up with, such as world building and that sort of thing, to see which would win. I won't say which, although it was fairly unanimous. And I could have come up with some categories. I suppose we could have come up with other categories that would have made it a little more balanced, but it was pretty unanimous in terms of the winner. But it was a fun discussion nevertheless, and I'm a huge fan of both books, both Game of Thrones and The Blade itself. And they're different in what the authors are setting out to achieve in many ways. So in some senses, this may sound weird, but I think that in some ways they're not even comparable. Because, for example, George R. R. Martin is, without a doubt, one of the greatest world builders ever to write, to put pen to paper, as it were. Whereas Joe Abercrombie is not really interested in world building. I think he does enough for the story, but he's more interested really in the characters, and it really shows. He has brilliant, distinctive, colorful characters, and I love his stories for that. But that's one area where obviously Martin that's his target, whereas Abercrombie's not. That's not even a target for him. He doesn't really care to invest in that kind of thing because he has other things he's focusing on, like humor, for example. So anyway, it was still a fun discussion. It was great. These things are a little arbitrary, but nevertheless, they're good excuses to talk about the books that we love. So I encourage you to check that out. And what else have I been doing? Well, by the time this is out, I will have been involved. I don't know when it's coming out because it's going to be recorded. It's not a live stream. So this may be out first or maybe that. But anyway, it's going to be a discussion of Ryan Cahill's Of Darkness and Light. This is the second full book in his series, The Bound and the Broken. I've actually have a few thoughts to say about it here today that I'll share with you. I won't do a dedicated review on it. Probably will do something when I finish the series on my own, but I'm in these wonderful discussions with John over at Talking Story, and Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, and Christopher Navo. And I hosted the first one, by the way, on Blood and Fire. Yeah, I think it's Blood and Fire, not Fire and Blood. Yes, of Blood and Fire. So there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of fire in fantasy, so sometimes we get things mixed up. But yes, that was a great discussion. And I will talk in a moment about my thoughts, just briefly here, non spoiler. But I'm sure I will have a good time talking with John and Mike and Christopher about Of Darkness and Light. And so yeah, look out for that. It'll be over on John's channel, and that is Talking Story, at some point soon, if it isn't out already by the time you watch this. So, oh my goodness, what else is going on here? What am I reading? Well, Of Darkness and Light. Let's talk about it. I finished it, obviously, or otherwise I would be in trouble because I only have a few hours before the discussion with those three. But yeah, here, so just quickly, my non-spoiler thoughts on this. I am having a great time with this series. I said in the first discussion that Ryan Cahill is I don't know if I actually said it or not, but I've been thinking it all along. He's a very talented storyteller. He's a storyteller kind of writer. The type of person who somehow it makes it at least feel, he probably works very hard on this, but it feels like he's just like a natural storyteller, someone who enjoys spinning a yarn. And it reminds me most, actually, in some ways, of the early John Gwynne novels, the first couple novels in The Faithful and the Fallen. And I say that for a couple of reasons, really. I think number one, the pacing. Both the earlier Faithful and the Fallen books, like Malice, for example, for me anyway, had a wonderful pacing. They were page turners, and that's very true also of Ryan Cahill's storytelling. He also has an ability, like John Gwynne, to get you very attached to the characters in a way there's a lot of camaraderie and that kind of thing. And I really enjoy that. A lot of us fantasy readers enjoy a kind of fellowship that emerges as characters go through the ringer. And Ryan Cahill is really great at presenting that kind of thing. I also feel that now I mentioned John Gwynn's earlier stuff, and I do feel that John Gwynne is a writer that I can visibly see him working on his craft to the point where the third book in The Faithful and Fallen, Ruin, for me was a real step up in terms of the prose. And I think of his latest series, the Bloodsworn Saga, and you look at The Hunger of the Gods. The opening of The Hunger of the Gods is absolutely brilliant. Now, when I read the start of The Faithful and Fallen, I thought Gwynne's prose was great. But when I looked at The Hunger of the Gods, I thought, my goodness, this is actually breathtakingly beautiful. So he's somebody I've seen progressively work on his prose, and I see hints in Of Darkness and Light that maybe Ryan Cahill is doing the same. That he's working on his prose. It's accessible. I don't have any complaints about it, but I feel like there were moments, unlike in the first book, which I enjoyed, but there were moments in Of Darkness and Light, and I thought, oh, that's a nice sentence there. So I hope that's something I continue to see in The Bound and the Broken. Cahill continually working on his prose. That is something that you often see with writers. Their first book, there's a lot of heart often in the first book because that's the story they've had in their hearts for a long time. But you can also see gradual improvement in the technical aspects of the craft. So I'm enjoying this a lot overall. This series, it's a page turner. I appreciated being able to read this while I was on vacation during moments when I was on the plane or whatever. I really needed this kind of read in those moments where I could get lost and forget that I was on a plane, and Cahill helped me to do that. So thank you, Ryan Cahill, for making my journey much more enjoyable as well. I don't enjoy sitting on planes very much, but I was in euphoria the whole time, so that was awesome. Another book that I finished reading, actually had read most of it before I set out on vacation, but I also finished it, was The Altar of My Fate, and this is by Michael Schultheis. It is the first book in the Rostival saga, which is 5 books long. And I want to start describing this book by giving some praise to Michael Schultheis because he achieved something in here that I feel is very rare in modern fantasy, and something that I personally treasure and look for. And that is that he gives this story in the voice of its first person narrator. So Rostival is the narrator and main character of this, he gives him a very distinctive voice. He gives this world a distinctive voice. It's very rare to see that in fantasy. And this is, my personal taste. So take it as you will. But I do feel that oftentimes in modern fantasy, particularly, it doesn't feel distinctive enough for me. It feels like the same kind of voice you could use for a modern novel. It feels like these characters could be in New Jersey, and you just replace the fancy fantasy names with names like, Poughkeepsie, as Ursula Le Guin wrote in her essay From Elfland to Poughkeepsie. And I'm kind of thinking of that essay as I'm discussing what Michael Schultheis was able to pull off, which is to convince me that this is a different world from ours. And that's a rare achievement, both, by the way, in self-published fantasy, which is what this is. Michael Schultheis is the self-published author, but also even in traditional publishing. I rarely see a modern fantasy that achieves this, and Michael Schultheis does that in this book, in The Altar of My Fate. I felt like I was in a totally different world with different, not only slight differences in the language, but also in the values, in the beliefs. I was convinced that I was in a totally different world, a different culture, a different way of seeing the universe. And in some ways, it's a lens that I did not enjoy at times, which is deliberate, I think, probably. It's a very patriarchal world that is being presented here. The narrator, he is very much in the vein of a kind of a Conan type figure. And I suspect that Michael Schultheis is probably a big fan of sword and sorcery, and that kind of very unreflective, very masculine, very celebrating war and prowess and constantly going after, or seeking out slave females who are essentially sex slaves, who come in, by the way, only a couple varieties, one half naked, the other fully naked. So yeah, there was a lot of that kind of just sort of uber masculinity kind of thing, which a lot of people enjoy. It's not my cup of tea often, but it's a big part of fantasy. So I followed it thinking, okay, well, are we going to do something with this? And this is also an example of a book where I feel like if I had said to myself, oh, I don't enjoy this type of character, I don't enjoy this narrator, he's the main character, if I had given up, I would have missed out on something, because about a couple hundred pages into it, I saw Michael Schultheis doing some interesting things with his character that I really did enjoy, and he introduces some humor in there. And it's not that it's subversive of sword and sorcery or anything like that, but he has a bit of fun with this, and I really admired that. I thought that that was really well done. So there are some great touches to this book. I think if you're somebody who does enjoy the sort of classic Conan sword and sorcery thing, and also an author who obviously I think is very well read, particularly in the realm of history, I don't think you can present a convincing world like that without being well read in some realm or other. And I think that Schultheis, it really shows that he's somebody who loves history, who loves authenticity, and you can feel that was poured into this story, that he really wanted to give us a sense of this is a different world, but also with nods to a kind of the feeling of an ancient society. He achieves that, and it's a marvelous thing to see. It felt like, kind of like, for me anyway, ancient world in the part of the world that today we call the Middle East, but going back to, say, Mesopotamia in some ways, or something of that nature. Just a bit of that flavor, really. I mean, it's an entirely made up world. Also, another thing that he does that I like, actually, and not everyone is going to like this, but I like this, is he kind of throws you into it with the magic system, with the way the magic works in here. It's different from most types of magic that I have seen. And there are, without, I think I can't go into it in too much detail, but it is a system that relies upon beings. I'm not sure if I were to tell you what they are. Rishvas, I guess I can say that, that confer power. in a way that it took me a bit to figure out, okay, how does this work? But that's probably deliberate. I think Schultheis throws you into that because obviously the narrator knows how it works. He's part of this world. He's not going to sit down and explain to you because that would be info dumpy. So instead, you have to sort of work to figure out. You do figure out more or less how it works within 100 or a couple hundred pages. So I like that. I like that I have to figure that out. I'm not, my hand is not being held, telling me how this works. So yeah, I've had a lot of praise for this. I do think that if you're a sword and sorcery reader, it's something you might want to check out, particularly if you're interested in some very well written self-published fantasy. So yeah, and what else am I going to be reading here? Well, I am going to be continuing with One Piece, as I said. I'm going to be reading Thriller Bark, and I'm excited to be back reading One Piece. And I'm also going to be reading the sixth book in the Wars of Light and Shadow by Jenny Wirtz. It is Peril's Gate, and I'm excited for this big book here right now. This is a major turning point, as I understand it, in this series. And you've heard me before probably praising Jenny Wirtz's world building, her prose, the beauty of her storytelling, the depth of it, the vastness of it. It's just got it all. I'm so excited to have this series under my belt because I do feel that it is probably, for me, in my mind, it's going to be one of the greatest achievements in the genre. I have a feeling at the end of the day, I'm going to have to consider it along with Malazan and Realm of the Elderlings as, yeah, one of those series. So I'm excited to continue. And of course, I'm going to be discussing it with Joanna and with AP from A Critical Dragon. And yeah, we have a series of discussions on the first 5 books. They're in my Jenny Wirtz playlists if you want to check those out. But yeah, excited for that. And One Piece and everything else. So lots of things coming up. I have more episodes of Dear Dr. Fantasy. I'm going to be talking with Jordan and Nikki from iWizard next. And I'm also going to be in a discussion over at 2 to Ramble. I'm excited about that. So be on the lookout for that later this month. And so much more. It's just great to be here. I'm excited to be in all of these discussions, be reading all these great books, to be talking with you guys, reading your comments, and interacting with all of you. Thank you so much for all of your support. So that is it from me for now. Until next time.